Carey Callahan is a detransitioned woman and family therapist from Ohio. She explores the role of sexism in the rise of youth referrals for gender dysphoria and the portrayal of transitioners or detransitioners in the media. Thank you.
I'm going to stay sitting because I'm lazy. And just to say, like, that is a very ambitious topic. And it turns out that that's more of a half-hour, 40-minute topic. So this is going to be much more of a DTrans 101 kind of thing, just to let you know. This is going to be about detransitioners and how we're responded to. I'll give you a little bit of context on me and why I'm a credible source on that. And then context on the changes in the structure of trans healthcare in this country and the likely increased prevalence of detransitioners.
Yell as much as you can.
Can everyone hear me in the back?
No, yes.
Oh, shoot. Okay, I'll stand. I know. I'm 37 and the energy is not there anymore. Okay, calm down. Okay, so I was trans-identified. I'm detransitioned. I did take testosterone for 9 months. I detransitioned in 2014, so it's been a minute. When I detransitioned in 2014, it's important to keep in mind that this all occurred in the shadow of the word TERF. So when I detransitioned, I was very scared of my peer group finding out that that I was thinking critically about this and that I would be labeled a TERF and what that would do to not only my peer group but also my career prospects. So I had an anonymous blog. I blogged under the pseudonym Maria Katz, and that's kind of what all my detransition peers were doing at the time also. In 2016, Julia Serrano wrote a little essay about us and about how we don't exist, pretty much, and how we are a right-wing trope. So it really pissed us off. And we decided that it was time that we had some visual evidence of our existence out in the world, right? So we made some YouTube videos because you don't really exist if you're not on YouTube. And at the time, it was a big deal. You could not go on YouTube and see detransitioner videos. Now you can kind of see a lot, and I encourage you to check them out. Out of that, I began YouTubing kind of advice for detransitioners, which at the time was a big deal. In 2017, I presented at the United States Professional Association on Transgender Health at the first professional presentation on detransition mental health care. It was a little scary, but I got to tell you that presentation was pretty warmly received. Everyone stayed chill and relaxed. So later in 2017, we were encouraged by an organizer of the Philly Trans Health Conference to present that presentation at Philly and a presentation on alternative methods of dealing with gender dysphoria. About 2 weeks before the conference, that was canceled. It was deplatformed because people felt that it was so controversial that it was going to result in violence. And also that parents of trans kids would come to our presentation and get the wrong idea and stop transitioning their kids. That was a prominent fear about us being in the mix. In 2018, so last year, I was profiled by The Atlantic in a short documentary that was an accompaniment to that intensely controversial Jesse Singal article about pediatric transition that came out last year. I did that. I participated in that video about a month before I had to graduate and take 2 licensure exams. Don't do that. That's not self-loving. So I've done a lot. And I have to, I'm bragging, first of all, but I just want to say that me and my detransition peers have been, actually in the past 5 years, incredibly effective at building community and support for detransitioners. I think that we've done an amazing job. I will tell you that I get tons of feedback about my appearance. I get tons of feedback about how the fact that I've cultivated such a normie appearance means that I couldn't have ever experienced gender dysphoria, which is a really bitter pill to swallow because I still sometimes, when I'm going through times of stress, will have intense levels of gender dysphoria. It is a double bind, which is we are all as female people subject to, because I'll tell you that my detransition peers that have an androgynous or masculine appearance are accused of being non-binary in denial. And I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen to my dear friends. So what I'll tell you is that there's actually no way to look that will affirm your credibility. It's just the classic female predicament that there's no way that the statements coming out of your mouth will take precedence over the statement that people attribute to your appearance. Yeah. So a little bit of detransition 101. So to detransition means that you're trans-identified and you participated in a medical intervention to affirm that trans identity, which can be hormones, can be surgery, right? There's also the term desistance that you're going to see a lot. And to desist means that you're trans-identified, you moved on from that without taking part in a medical intervention. How many detransitioners there are is hotly debated, and we have almost no research on it. So the best number that we have is a 2% prevalence rate. And I want to tell you where this comes from and why it's such a lousy number. So that comes from a Swedish public records search. So they did a study of Swedish name changes from 1960 to 2010. And to be considered detransitioned for this study, you had to go all the way to applying to change your name, and then go all the way to applying to change your name back. Just to say, I would not be counted in this statistic. I know about 300 detransitioners. I probably know about 10 who have done this, okay? So there's one way that this 2% number is like lousy. Another way that it's kind of lousy is that Sweden, from 1960 to 2010, is a very different context than America. So for one, everyone who transitioned in Sweden during that time had to go through a really structured assessment process. There was no such thing as an informed consent clinic at this time, right? So informed consent is, at this point, the norm in America. I'll also say that 2 out of every 100 people, which is 2%, is actually not a negligible rate. That's actually a lot. So a Williams study estimated that the amount of trans people in America was 1.5 million. We can't assume that all of those people are going to engage in medical interventions. But if we say that a third of them are going to engage in a medical intervention, and we say that 2% of those will detransition, that's actually 11,000 people. So not a small group that might need some support. We hardly know anything about the experience of female detransitioners, and that's because research gets shut down. So in February of this year, a high court in the UK affirmed Bath Spa University's decision to not approve James Caspian's proposal to study detransitioner experiences. And they refused to do that because, quote, attacks on social media may not be confined to the researcher, but may involve the university. So research on detransitioners is controversial enough that we're just not going to do it. So in fact, the best information that we have on detransitioners comes from detransitioners. And in 2016, a young detransitioned woman who blogs at Guide on Raging Stars put out a survey and found 203 female people who had either detransitioned or desisted. She found 117 of them that had medically transitioned. Out of those 117, so this is 117 that's either gone through hormones or surgery, 41 had received no therapy before. In her sample, the average age of coming out as transgender was 17 years old, and the average age of detransitioning was 21 years old. And what's interesting is if you look at Erickson's classic stages of human development, that actually lines up with the identity development stage versus the relational challenge stage. So what can I tell you about even how many people are transitioning in America right now? Well, I can tell you that the HRC has 44 clinics listed in America that serve gender-expansive youth. It's hard to try and get a number of how many kids are coming through those clinics, partly because our capitalist medical system produces really lousy stats. In England, where they have socialized medicine, they produce much better stats. So the Tavistock Clinic in the UK found that from 2016 to 2017, there was a 42% increase in youth referrals. I couldn't find you statistics on the number of informed consent clinics in America, but I'll tell you that many universities provide hormone therapy on an informed consent basis. Should I go in? Do people need to know what informed consent is? Great, yeah. Yeah, so informed consent is a model of care where you sign over your right to see your doctors. So it means that you would check off a list saying, I understand there's very little research on testosterone long term. I understand that there may be effects of this that I don't want. I won't sue you, I won't sue you. Planned Parenthood is also committed to providing hormone therapy on an informed consent basis. So from the Planned Parenthood of Illinois website, for the agenda for getting hormone therapy, they say that the agenda for your second visit when you're seeking hormone therapy will be to review your lab results and get your prescription for HRT. The Planned Parenthood Massachusetts website says that depending on your medical history, we will either prescribe the hormones to you at your first visit or wait to prescribe the hormones until we get your lab results back. So at least they're checking your cholesterol, you know. So what I'm telling you is that within the past 15 years, there's a massive increase in opportunities to get hormone therapy without any psychological assessment process. And this is why I am passionate about detransitioned mental health care services. So I'm passionate, but I've got to tell you that besides speaking and writing about this, I can't really work on the project in a therapeutic capacity because I feel like strongly for myself that I can't support pediatric transition. I worry that in 10 years, I'll have a lot of people to serve who have been through pediatric transition, and to be involved in trans healthcare right now, to be taken seriously and allowed to participate, you need to be on board with the pediatric transition thing. So in the fall, I was approached to contribute a 2-hour presentation on detransitioned mental health care to a transgender mental health certificate program. Therapists will do these things where you pay a lot of money, like thousands of dollars, to get a certificate. The problem was that the facilitators and the people who are going to be making money from the certificate program are like very aggressive proponents of pediatric transition. And I was like, I can't do this.
What is pediatric transition?
Oh, it's transitioning people under 18. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Medically.
Right. Yeah. So it's providing hormones or surgery to a kid under 18, or puberty blockers, because that's a big part of pediatric transition, is giving kids Lupron and other GnRH agonists to shut off their hormonal system. Is everyone bummed out now? Okay, great. Okay, so maybe I can talk about a little bit.
Yes, sure.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about where are we at with
You're fascinating.
Don't worry about it. Just go.
Great, awesome,
Fascinating. You're great.
awesome, great, thanks, thank you.
Thanks.
So I wanted to talk about what you're not going to see in mainstream portrayals of detransitioners versus what you are going to see when you seek out detransitioner-produced media, right? And at this point, you have no excuse. There's lots of detransitioner-produced media, okay? There's, let me give you some names. You can check out the Peak Resiliency Project, which is, yeah, clap for them, they're great. Which is a YouTube series with 4 detransitioned women. They also do a podcast called the Danger Ramen Podcast. There's all kinds of blogs, all kinds of zines. I don't want to give you all the names of the blogs, but I have an essay on Medium called Advice for Gender Dysphoric Teens that has a list of all of my top detransitioner blogs. And the main difference that you're going to see is that one huge theme in detransitioner-produced media is the idea of post-traumatic growth. And what you're going to see in mainstream media portrayals of detransitioners is a lot of trauma and pity, okay? So post-traumatic growth is a psychological term, and it's defined as the experience of individuals whose development, at least in some areas, has surpassed what was present before the struggle with crises occurred. The individual has not only survived, but has experienced changes that are viewed as important and go beyond the status quo. this is a huge theme in detransitioner media. People get out of trans identification, and suddenly all these resources that they had been dedicating to that project are free. So suddenly people end up finishing grad school. They end up producing research. They end up doing zines. They end up making meetups. They end up doing a whole lot. And so if you look at videos of people talking about their detransitions, they'll describe years of just suddenly being very effective in the world. And that was certainly, my experience of detransition is that since detransitioning, I've learned that I'm much more effective and powerful than I understood previously. And that's not what you're going to see in terms of magazines and newspapers telling you detransitioner stories. You're going to see a lot of stories of trauma and people you feel a lot of pity for. And I have a personal experience with this. So in 2018, I agreed to participate in this documentary by The Atlantic. I did not want to participate in the first place because I'm not actually sure that I'm the best rep for detransitioners. I think in a lot of ways I'm a strange detransitioner. I transitioned old, and I just don't want to rep. I don't want to be the symbol. But I couldn't find someone else to do it, which I have a lot of resentment about. And in the end, I saw Jesse Singal's article, and I was like, shoot, there's nothing in this article about the fact that detransitioners were deplatformed at Philly. There's a lot missing from this story in terms of detransitioners. So I said, I'll do this video if the video is mostly about what just happened in the past year. Okay, so it turns out you cannot negotiate with media production people. That's not a thing. So I had all of these, things that was important to me. It was in the video. It was important to me. We talk about being deplatformed. It was really important to me that this be about like my role as a therapist. And instead, the video that was produced was about a very sad woman that people evidently feel very sorry for. We had, the video opens with a line that I was like fed. It turns out one of my lessons from this is that I should not talk to the media without a handler. Handlers are very important, it turns out. It was a real trip. I would say that it was kind of traumatic. I get lots of emails from people who say that they're praying for me. I get lots of people who tell me that Jesus loves me, which is like, fine, yeah, but like it's all chill, And it was interesting to have all these people feeling really bad for me, really bad. A lot of people saying that I needed lots of therapy. Because, I consider myself someone who can do things that a lot of those people can't do. So it's interesting to have a lot of people pity you, that you're like, but you could not accomplish what I've done. So that's all. Yeah. So anyway, I would really encourage you to check out Detransitioner Media. Please check out the Peak Resiliency Project. There's tons of videos now. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks so much.